News of the day.
Mr. Zimmerman, have you made a decision as to whether or not you want to testify in this case?
With values that never die.
There are certainly a lot of controversies or scandals brewing right now when it comes to the Obama administration.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
Dealing with the federal government is not always high-tech, and it's not always user-friendly.
The stories that matter.
This is a massive escalation in the tension here in Egypt.
The issues that count.
I don't know why the media tries to make this into a sensation. We have never hidden the fact that we supply Syria with weapons.
This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
He's got the red, white, blue flying high on the farm. Semper Fi tattooed on his left arm. Spend a little more in the store.
Welcome to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I am the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. I was away last week. I was in Arizona visiting family there. We got into a debate, the family did, as to whether or not the sun shines brighter in Phoenix and Scottsdale, that whole area. And I can tell you, the sun there is absolutely gorgeous. It is the most beautiful sun that I have ever seen. I do think it shines brighter. If you haven't been there, do go there to visit. One of the most beautiful places in the U.S. Had a great trip. And I am refreshed and ready to rock and roll here. Thank you for joining us. You know, everyone is talking about 2016. And one of the things we're discussing is, can anybody in the GOP field beat Hillary Clinton? And I think the answer to that question is very clear. Yes, Hillary Clinton can easily be beaten. And I'll tell you why from a conservative point of view. But even before I give you my point of view, listen to what a Democratic strategist had to say. There's a lot of rumblings, even within her own party, despite the fact that she blows away the field on the Democratic side. Nobody comes close to winning the Democratic nomination right now. She's in the high 60s, and the next contender, someone like Biden, is polling at 14% amongst Democrats. So she's really blowing the field. But the bigger question is, can she really sustain a withering attack by a strong GOP candidate if she becomes the candidate for the Democrats? And listen to what some liberals are saying. Roll it, Brittany.
I've heard from other Democratic strategists, including people close to the Clinton world, that they're worried about the State Department record, that they feel like there's nothing that's going to shine that brightly in a record filled with achievements, that there isn't anything that stands out that brightly to dominate her prospective campaign. So then you have, 5 or 6 years of basically no votes.
Well, let's take a look for a moment at Hillary's career. She was First Lady, and I think in many respects there's a lot there that can be used against her for being silent while Bill Clinton was preying upon women, abusing women, essentially. She basically was an enabler of that. She was a senator, which is basically a debating club. And then she became the Secretary of State, in which not only is there no grand doctrine or any one thing that you can point to and say, well, this is what Secretary Clinton did during her tenure that was really successful. In fact, not only does she not have anything to show for her time there, but there are actually 2 huge black marks upon her as Secretary of State. One is Benghazi, and that is going to haunt her till her dying day for what she didn't do to protect the compound as they were asking for security, and then for the cover-up that followed. And number 2, another big black stain on her record is the whole Russia reset, which we now see is a colossal failure and a colossal disaster. So she doesn't have a positive record to run. And in fact, she's got these big black marks against her that can be used to completely destroy her credibility. In addition, she has been a spokesperson for reforming healthcare. And the healthcare reform that has gone down under Barack Obama is a failure. And that, too, can be used against her. So the list of negatives is really very large, and I don't think we've even begun to explore that. So I think she's a much, much weaker candidate than people think. Remember that it's far too early in the game to say. There was a time when Rudy Giuliani was considered the inevitable GOP candidate. There wasn't even any point in anybody running against him. And he got blown away in 2008 by other candidates. So it is far too soon to see just how badly her reputation can be damaged by a concerted attack upon her record. And I think with a concerted attack, there's so much negative there that the polling now is not representative of what it will be once all the ammunition against her is fully fired. But let's take a look for a moment at the GOP side. There's a new poll out that shows that in Iowa, there is one individual who now leads the field, and he is former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee. He is now polling at the very top in Iowa with 14.7% among Republicans, and others trail him. There is Jeb Bush in second place at 10.7%. Rand Paul is close, running neck and neck with Jeb Bush. But essentially, you have former Governor Mike Huckabee leading the field. And in some national polls, he's also leading the field. So there's a split in the national polls between some showing that Governor Christie's at the top and others showing that it is Mike Huckabee. Well, I want to turn for a moment to reflect a little bit on the GOP field. Let's look at why Mike Huckabee is resonating with the American people. I think there is one simple reason: conviction. This is a man who speaks with great clarity and tremendous conviction. In all my years in Washington, D.C., I saw many politicians, I met many of them, and I also listened to many of them speak. And I can tell you something about Governor Huckabee. When I first heard him speak in a room that was packed, he literally took my breath away. And I turned to my husband and I gasped. I said, wow, he's a star. There is something about him when he speaks. He is mesmerizing speaker. And he is mesmerizing because he doesn't use doublespeak. He's not ambiguous. He doesn't use Washington speak. He speaks clearly, concisely, and he speaks with, one of my favorite words, moral authority. This is a man who is immersed in Christian thought. In fact, he attended a seminary. He was a pastor too. This is a man who is a deep, true Christian. I watch his show and I'm really impressed with his character. One time recently, he was reflecting upon what are his greatest achievements. And he said, his greatest achievement is that his children turned out okay. That to me is telling of, it shows that his heart is in the right place. I think his judgment is very good. His heart is in the right place. And he's a man of courage in defending social conservatism. And I want to play a couple of clips that show you why he's so powerful. Here he is in Iowa defending the Bible. Roll it, Brittany.
I honestly don't care what people do personally in their individual lives, but I tell you, the reason when people say, well, why don't you just kind of get on the right side of history? I said, you got to understand, this for me is not about the right side or the wrong side of history. This is the right side of the Bible. And unless God rewrites it, edits it, sends it down with his signature on it, it's not my book to change. Folks, that's why I stand where I stand.
Simple words and affirming his Christian faith, but in a humble way. It's not his to change. It's not mine to change. It's not yours to change. When people debate me and say, oh, I disagree with your position on this or that, I often say, look, don't take it up with me. I'm really low on the totem pole here. I'm a small messenger. I read the Bible. I try to interpret it. You got a problem with this moral code? Take it up with Jesus. Take it up with God. Take it up with the Bible. And I really like the way Huckabee defends himself, and this is so appealing to evangelicals across the country. Remember, had Mitt Romney just gotten more of the evangelicals to come out to vote, he would have beaten Obama in 2012. So I think Mike Huckabee will certainly galvanize the evangelical vote. And I think, too, there's also something else that I really, really like about him. I've gone on the record as saying I no longer identify myself as a Republican. I'm calling for the formation outright of the Christian Party of America. I think that's the only way we're going to get this country straight. I think we've got to put morality and culture and social issues first in order to fix all the other problems in our country. Because my analysis is this: character always comes first. And as the American character deteriorates, so does everything else. And I think unless we put our Christian principles first, this decline in America will continue in perpetuity. Well, I want to play another clip now that Huckabee, he was interviewed by Laura Ingraham, and he also spoke so brilliantly on the issue of same-sex marriage. He attacked President Obama, and he used such surgical analysis, such precision. Again, if you listen closely, what drives this man's precise ability to argue? It's because he's so deeply rooted in his Christian faith. Listen to this.
Absolutely, Laura. And, you know, the position that I hold is the position that Barack Obama, Hillary Clinton, and Joe Biden held in 2008. Barack Obama held it until 2012. And my question that I would love to pose to the president is this. Mr. President, please explain that when you said in 2008 at the Saddleback Church Forum that you stood for traditional marriage, and you did so because you were a Christian and because it's what the Bible taught, please answer. Were you lying then? Are you lying now? Or did the Bible get rewritten? And I'm just wanting somebody in the press to answer that honest question. I can't come up with another alternative of what could have happened. One of those three scenarios has to be the reason that he was feeling comfortable enough to change his mind. Now, if he just said, look, I just believe this because it's historic or it's traditional, that's not what he said. He said it was because of his Christian convictions. Does he have them or does he not? If one has them, they don't change depending on what the culture does. You don't take an opinion poll to come up with a new point of view.
Brilliant. He basically showed that the President of the United States changed his position on same-sex marriage simply because it was expedient. And this also calls into question the Christianity that he professed in the 2008 campaign. Because, as Huckabee said so brilliantly, Christian convictions don't change. You know, it's the motto of this show. I uphold values that will never die. Sometimes more people like these values, and sometimes less people like these values. It doesn't matter. The values aren't going to change. They've been around for 2,000 years, and they'll continue to be around. The only question is who is going to adopt them and who is going to reject them. But that's an age-old question. That's an age-old question of salvation itself. But what I like about Huckabee is he doesn't accept the politically correct mantra. He doesn't accept the politically correct worldview. You can hear it in how he speaks. You can hear it in how he thinks. You can hear it in how he attacks the president. Brilliant and rooted in conviction and moral authority. And there's something else, too, that we have to say. I think when we're looking for the next leader of the Republican Party, we should disqualify the senators. I think you have to have a governing record. That means Senator Rand Paul and Ted Cruz, who everybody is buzzing about right now, I don't think they should even make the first cut. Because what are these two? They're just yappers. That's what senators are. They just talk and they cast votes. Now, are they good senators? Yes. Are they brilliant senators? Yes. Do they articulate their positions well? Yes. Are they doing a service to the party? Yes. But they have no executive experience. And when I argued against Barack Obama in 2008, I said we cannot elect this man because he doesn't have executive experience. And I'm going to be consistent when it comes to the GOP field. You want me to analyze the candidates that I think are worthy? Give me the governors. I want the next Republican candidate to be a former governor, who has a record, a long record that we can examine. When it comes to Governor Huckabee, we have a record. He was a long-serving governor of Arkansas. There are things in that record that I do not like, and we can talk about that another time. But at least he makes the first cut for me, which is he's a man of deep conviction, he's a man of true Christian faith, and he has executive experience. That's the kind of material we need to be looking at in order to win in the next election. You're listening to Dr. Grace, upholding values that are never, ever, ever gonna die.
matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
American Heartland. I'm Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com. What do we want in a leader? We don't want a leader who is ambiguous in foreign affairs. We don't want any blurred lines in foreign affairs, that's for sure. Unlike all the blurred lines that our president has been submitting to the Russians, and they're taking full advantage of it. You know, before we get on to the next segment, I just want to wrap up a few thoughts on the GOP field. One of the problems with Senator Rand Paul is that his foreign policy vision, in my view, is really, really flawed and dangerous. In fact, this week, Bolton said that Rand Paul's foreign policy is one ambiguous mess. And I agree with that. He tries to cast himself as in the mold of Ronald Reagan, but that is a very misleading characterization. Ronald Reagan amassed a vast arsenal, and that's what he used to defeat the Soviet Empire. He understood that the more armaments you have, the greater chance you will have of maintaining peace and order around the world. Rand Paul basically argues the opposite thing. He wants the complete dismantling of the military complex. He wants America to come home completely, or I mean, maybe that's an overstatement, but he definitely wants a grave cutback in American intervention around the world. And I think that that is an extreme and dangerous position. But the point that I really want to hammer home is that that's certainly not in the mold of Ronald Reagan. And moreover, Ronald Reagan was a governor with a long record of success. And again, with Senator Rand Paul, he's a senator. And senators are very good at talking. In fact, they're mesmerizing speakers. But it's a whole different set of skills. When you come to the Oval Office, you need a whole different set of skills. Those who are good at debating and talking and even being able to present what an opinion is and its rebuttal very well. Senator Cruz and Senator Rand Paul, they do that brilliantly. They're able to say, this is my ideology, this is my opponent's ideology, this is where I differ. They're quite captivating. But you need a different set of skills to govern, and we've seen that with Barack Obama. He was a senator. He speaks really, really well. He's eloquent. In some ways, Rand Paul and Senator Cruz are the flip side, or the opposite, you might say, the conservative versions of Barack Obama in this sense. They're phenomenal speakers with no record of achievement. And I don't want the country to go down that road again, because what does it take to be a good governor, a good leader? It takes the ability to get into the nitty-gritty of policy and to be able to build personal relationships with people from both parties in order to garner the votes to get things done. And usually these types that are good debaters, they're more like intellectuals. They're more like professors. They're more professorial. They're very good at abstract thinking, but they're not very good at getting in there and hammering out the deals. In fact, I would say people like myself, people like my husband, we're very good at the yapping. And I know that that's one set of skills that is very important in our society. But we find the nitty-gritty of policy and all the handshaking and all the negotiating, we find that dreadfully boring. And so we'd never be good at it. And I want to warn the American people that Rand Paul and Ted Cruz are in that very same mold. And we're going down a very dangerous road if we're going to consider them as serious candidates. I think we're making a very grave mistake. There's a different kind of character that leads successfully. And they have to have done a lot of that hard work of deal-making, negotiating, and policy wonking. Say what you want. Someone like Bill Clinton, you might like him, you might dislike him. but he was a governor. He was a far better president than Barack Obama has been, precisely because he liked all that deal-making, all that policy wonking. And I don't think that Rand Paul and Senator Ted Cruz are in that mold at all. I think they'll be just as disastrous as Barack Obama. Well, it's pretty hard to be just as disastrous, but I would say pretty darn close. But even if I support their ideology and I don't Barack Obama's. So I'm mentioning all this too because we're also looking for who is going to lead us in foreign policy. I think somebody like Rand Paul would be a complete disaster in foreign affairs, just as bad as Barack Obama. What has happened now is, as we speak, Putin has control of 11 cities in eastern Ukraine and counting. And to make matters worse, the Russian Federation has now approved his use of force. Remember, just a few weeks ago, he said he had no further designs. After having annexed the Crimea, he had no further designs on eastern Ukraine. And I said, hogwash. And in fact, what he's doing is he's simply replicating the exact same playbook. So he sends his special Russian forces in to wreak havoc. And this would actually be funny if it wasn't so deadly serious. If you see those images, you see that it's the exact same forces with the black masks. I mean, who does he think he's kidding? That this is just unrest in eastern Ukraine? No, this is sabotage of eastern Ukraine. It's as clear as day. That's a farcical explanation. You know, my little girl who's 1 now, she likes to play this game where she often peeks her head out from somewhere and says, I see you. And I kind of want to say the same thing to those Russian forces. I see you. We see who you are. We see what you're doing. And as I warned before, the total lack of forceful response from both the United States and the weak, pathetic Europeans has sent one clear message to Vladimir Putin. Go, 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 and don't stop going. Grab as much territory as you possibly can. This week, Colonel Ralph Peters basically said that he thinks that Ukrainians are now in an absolutely no-win position and that the president's foreign policy has been nothing short of a disaster. Roll it, Britain.
Well, the problem for the Ukrainian government is they don't want to fire on their own people. So the special operators, paratroopers, GRU agents that Putin sent in have surrounded themselves with local thugs, a ring of local thugs, and then with a ring of people who are, civilians, but who sympathize with Russia. Now, the demonstration numbers are small, but these Ukrainian soldiers, young soldiers, don't want to fire on their own people, but the Russians are perfectly happy to fire on the Ukrainians. So if the Ukrainians are damned if they do, damned if they don't. If they do open fire, that gives Putin an excuse to go in. If they don't open fire, Putin's already got what he wants. I mean, we've watched him as Obama pleads, and please, Mr. Putin, please talk, let's negotiate. Putin has first taken over administrative buildings in 3 cities. Now he's up to 11 cities and major towns. His thugs are all over the place, and we're pretending that somehow negotiations are going to get Putin out. Well, they didn't get him out of Crimea. I don't think anybody's pretending that. I think President Obama really believes it. President Obama believes you could negotiate with cancer tumors. He is a fool and a weakling, and sanctions could have hurt.
Well, I think at this point, if I was President Putin, I would just keep right on going. And you mark my words, I think he's going to take Belarus, he's going to take Moldova, he's going to take the rest of Ukraine. And I, by and large, agree with Colonel Ralph Peters, except in this one respect. I think that the Ukrainian people have to at least put up a fight. I don't think it's as clear-cut as he's saying that they're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. If they start fighting, it gives the world, too, a chance to come and help them. But if they're not fighting, they're just going to give up all of their land, and the Russian forces are going to be emboldened to the point of going well beyond eastern Ukraine. So even though the Russian forces are, really trying to put the Ukrainians in a box by having them fire on their own people, if the firing starts happening, some of those people are not going to join the Russian forces. So I think you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to start defending your own land. If you want the rest of the world to rally to you, you're the ones that have to start fighting first. Hello, that's War 101. Sadly, I'm reminded of a conversation that my husband and I had years ago with one of our Ukrainian friends who passed away. He was a Ukrainian nationalist, and he sat down with us and said, and this was way before this recent confrontation occurred, he said, you know, if ever the Ukrainians are challenged, he thought that their sense of nationalism was very weak. He didn't think that they would fight. And sadly, we're seeing that happen. And the rest of the world has to shrug their shoulders and say, look, if you're not going to fight, what do you expect the rest of the world to do? So I think we have to begin by encouraging the Ukrainians to fight. That's step number one. And here I disagree with the Obama administration. They keep saying, no, don't fight. Don't provoke the Russians any further. The Russians don't need provocation. They're rolling forward. Now you have no choice. You have to fight. And by not fighting, what you're doing is you're de facto allowing the Russians to take over. So what kind of stupid advice is this to the Ukrainians? They have to start by fighting. We should encourage them to fight. And we should be helping them in their fight. Because you mark my words, we're going to end up fighting either when Russia is weak or when Russia is stronger. That is what history has taught us. Well, you know, this week there's also another fascinating debate going on in Washington, D.C., and that is, why is there such a profound distrust of our government? And this is growing out of all proportion, even when we talk about the whole issue of income inequality. What is at the root of this? Well, I thought there was a couple of folks on the right who made some really, really brilliant points about some of the ailments in our nation today. One of these is that, unfortunately, we now have collusion between big government and big business. And this is an unholy alliance that is basically working to suppress economic growth. Listen to what Charles Murray has to say on this topic.
Very capitalist, that you were one of the people when you got successful. That's not nostalgia, that's true. Back in the 1960s or 50s when I was growing up, the executives of the Maytag Company in the town where I lived wouldn't buy Cadillacs, getting too fancy, too flamboyant. There's another thing that's going on, Mary, which is even bigger. Capitalism in bed with the government, big time. The American people look at the way that people make zillions of bucks because they can get the regulations written the way they want to, because they get the government to support their technology. They see that going on, plus the crony capitalism. And the number of these capitalists who are enthusiastically in favor of real competition is depressingly small.
So he makes quite a few brilliant points. Capitalists today are not patriotic. I'm talking as a champion of capitalism. Remember that capitalism made this country great. It made it great because the capitalists were patriots and they had a moral code as they pursued their business. But nowadays, what we have are greedy capitalists who are ostentatious too. I thought it was interesting how we spoke about another culture, another time in our history when the culture among capitalists was different, which was not to be ostentatious, even those who were in the higher ups in any specific company. And he spoke too about this unholy alliance between capitalists and government, where regulations are now written to benefit those who have access to people in government. And this is causing tremendous mistrust. Jim DeMint also spoke out today. He's the leader of the Heritage Foundation, this week that is. He's the leader of the Heritage Foundation, and he was a former senator who has an insider's view of this collusion. Listen to what he had to say about how big government actually makes the rich richer. Roll it, Brittany.
In commuting distance.
7 of 10 of the top 10 richest counties in America are right here in Washington.
Do you have a theory of why that is?
Yeah, and that's what we're right about here is the president's talking about the 1% and the gap between the poor and the rich. The reason that is happening is big government benefits the rich and big business, and it makes it harder to spread the wealth the way it was spread in America with thousands and thousands of small businesses and entrepreneurs. That's where the jobs are created. The community banks are the ones that help little businesses like mine. The big banks would never have lent me any money because I wasn't a good credit risk, and someone just trusted me. So if we can get Americans to just say one thing, Terry, to not buy this lie that the federal government's going to help our schools, it's going to help our healthcare system, it's going to help the middle class, it just is not true.
It's not true. The bigger government gets, the more this benefits the few who have access to the people in government. And I saw that firsthand. Listen to what else Jim DeMint had to say based on all of his years in the Senate.
Same thing true with a lot of congressional staff that's supposed to have oversight over these industries. So how could a regulator who wants to work for a company actually be hard on the compliance part of it? It doesn't happen.
What he points out is this. You have so many regulators in D.C. They're making about $75,000 a year, let's say. And they know once they get cozy with a specific lobbyist on K Street, or they got cozy with a specific group on K Street where all the lobbyists are, they know that eventually, if they serve a specific industry well, or a specific lobby group well, they can make triple that once they no longer work on the Hill. And what do you see on the Hill? You see all of these young people who are putting in killer hours, and they have one objective: get to K Street, get to a cushier job where they're going to make 3 times what they're making. So the game is rigged against the American people. I saw all of that firsthand. That is one of the reasons my husband and I packed up and went to another state. You are listening to Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at WorldTribune.com, upholding values that will never, ever die.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
I can't live without you, I can't live without you, baby, baby. The highway won't hold you tonight, the highway don't know you're
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. I'm the editor of Politics and Culture at WorldTribune.com. This week, we remember with great sadness the Boston bombings that occurred last year, which claimed 3 lives and also injured 260 people. And much of the conversation this week has also been about what have we learned, where do we go from here to ensure that something like this never happens again? Well, I think that it's quite easy to solve the problem of Muslim extremism in America if we have the courage to do so. And my approach would be very, very simple. The first would consist of vigorously affirming our national identity at every turn, especially when it comes to confronting those Muslims who admire or who seek to expand the practice of Sharia law. This week, I thought Reverend Franklin Graham very brilliantly stated how muscular we have to be in confronting those who want to bring Sharia law here. Roll it, Brittany.
Well, we should be afraid of Sharia law. We should be absolutely afraid of it. No question about it. Because there's no tolerance in Sharia law, and it persecutes those that do not believe in Islam. And I would say to Muslims in this country, if they want to practice Sharia law, go back to where you came from, to those nations that recognize Sharia law. But we have our own laws here.
Exactly. So none of this politically correct, namby-pamby, try to appease those who are fervent adherents of Sharia law or who espouse in any way, shape, or form an extreme view of the Muslim faith. So affirming our national identity to those who are here and affirming that our identity and our way of doing things, we believe, is actually superior to theirs. That's the kind of self-confidence it takes in order to eradicate this burgeoning muscular Muslim extremism that seems to be lurking in the darkness amongst us. Another thing, too, we need a moratorium on all immigrants from Muslim nations. I don't care how draconian this sounds, but if I had the power to do so in order to protect this nation, I would say there isn't going to be another Muslim who enters this country until this problem of extremism around the world is rectified, is solved. And some would say, well, aren't you punishing those who just want to come to America because they want a better life? I'm sorry. I have two options here. Either I punish you or I punish the next victim at another Boston Marathon or somewhere else in this country. Who do I choose? Well, I stand with the American people. Our objective is to protect our people first, and we have to do what is necessary to achieve that goal. So I would say no more immigration from any predominantly Muslim nation, period. And the message we would be sending to all the Muslim nations, especially to those people within those nations who are moderate, is get your act together. Clean house. Clean up this extremism in your midst. And number 3, the next thing that I would do is I would support this initiative that I was so thrilled to read about this week in the Wall Street Journal. There's a group called, it's a Muslim advocacy group, and they are called the Muslim Public Affairs Council. And the president of this organization has said, we need to be very vigorous in rooting out extremism in our communities when we see it. He's really very eloquent when he says this. This question is always framed as, why do we have to apologize for something that has nothing to do with us? So he's basically talking about those Muslims in the communities that say, look, I'm a peace-loving person. Why do I have to apologize for the extremists? And the president's response is, the president of this organization, we're saying that you have to take responsibility, that there are Muslim extremists out there and that they make it worse for all of us. Bingo. So Muslims in America have to take responsibility for the extremism that percolates in their communities. And how do they do that? Well, this organization wants to launch a program. It's called Safe Spaces Initiative. And what this is meant to do is it's meant to galvanize the community. Whenever they see somebody that seems like they're going down the road of extremism. If you look at the Tsarnaev brothers, one of them, for example, had several outbursts in a mosque. An incident like that, how did they respond to that? They just told him, look, if you make these outbursts again, you're not welcome here anymore. Instead, this program would say, wait a minute, when somebody is making an outburst that seems very bizarre, that seems out of place, that seems like there's a lot of violence or rage or unsettled behavior, that's a red flag. And what should be done is that the leaders of the mosque should stage an intervention right away. These programs are in place in our schools already. You see some kind of strange behavior, you don't just ignore it, and you don't just ignore the student. You stage an intervention. You bring the student in. You talk to that student. You talk to the parents. You talk to the relatives. You talk to the friends. Remember this, too. The Muslim family members who have a young person that goes down the road of jihad, they end up suffering the terrible loss too, the loss of a brother, the loss of a son. They end up suffering immensely. And so a program like this is meant to say, wait a minute, if you have a brother, a cousin, a sister, somebody in the community that you see is acting strangely, these are the steps you need to take to pull them back from the brink of possible violence. Yes, we need to have those programs in place. And what that does is it also sends a message, a strong message to the Muslim communities within the United States. Look, you're going to have to help us fix the problem. You're going to have to help us clean up the mess. And you should do it, not just because it's morally right to do it, but also because your community suffers if you don't help us. And I want to relate a very, very personal story just to bring this point home. My very best friend is an Italian woman that I met in Washington, D.C. She came from Italy to work in a company in D.C. And during her years here, she fell in love with a practitioner of the Muslim faith, somebody from Morocco. She ended up marrying him. So because she's my best friend, I'm very close with him now and their beautiful little daughter. And I have talked very candidly to him. Now, he's a peace-loving person. He just came to America to make a better life for himself. And I'll never forget the night that we sat down, and I'll never forget these words. He said, "Osama bin Laden ruined my life." I think this is important for a lot of Americans to hear, because those Muslims who don't want to partake in violence, they are nonetheless smeared by it, because willy-nilly there's a certain prejudice that percolates in American society when you see Muslims. And how could it be otherwise? How is everyone else supposed to know who's the peace lover and who's the next jihadist? So everybody is invariably smeared with that brush. So he, who is a peace-loving person, has conveyed to me, look, he's viewed upon with great distrust. He's viewed upon with suspicion. He's not going to have the same standing in this country as he could have had before 9/11. And that's very tragic for him. And it's very tragic for all the other Muslims just like him, who literally came to this country to improve their lot, like the Italians, like the Irish, like every other immigrant group. So a program like this is in the best interest of the Muslim community. You need to stage these interventions if you see that. And you need to also, I would even go further than that, not just staging the interventions, but I would actually galvanize these communities to talk to the youth about the dangerous road they would go down for themselves if they pursue the path of jihad. The destruction that this brings, not only in their own lives, which obviously they're expecting because they think they're going to be martyrs, but the destruction that it brings to their family, to their relatives, to the larger community, to the reputation of their faith too. If you truly want people to come to a faith of their own free will, the last thing you want to do is smear it with this kind of a brush that it is linked with some of the most heinous acts on earth. And so I think that the youth who are truly idealistic, that truly have a fervent love of the Muslim faith, in order to prevent that from spilling into jihad and violence, the intervention should be not just for those who seem to be going down that road, that seem unstable or seem to just have embraced jihadist ideology, but even to talk to the youth way before they even approach that. So I would do that, and I think you would solve the problem in this country. Very, very simple. Affirm our national identity, a moratorium on all immigrants from Muslim nations until the problem of jihadism worldwide is truly under control. And finally and lastly, vigorous intervention in all Muslim communities by Muslims themselves. And there you have it. No more Boston bombings. You're listening to Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at worldtribune.com, upholding values that are never, ever going to die.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace. The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.
The best damn thing you looked into. Well, that's easy, girl. Mine would be you. Mine would be you. Sun-kissed, shining, back road flying.
Welcome back to American Heartland with Dr. Grace. Those are the sweet, sweet sounds of Blake Shelton singing one of my favorite songs, And we're going to talk about Blake Shelton in a minute because I want to address my favorite show on TV nowadays, which is The Voice. But before we get to that, there's a story that I read this week about infants who are so addicted to iPads that they do not have the motor skills to play with building blocks. And also, there's a new phenomenon going on. You have infants that are exposed to iPads from birth. And therefore, as they age, they are not very good at writing, handwriting. They don't do very well with pen and paper. And there's another phenomenon, too, is that too much exposure to iPads is also leading to an erosion of memory. Any skill that requires memory. We're seeing now, studies are showing that this is really detrimental to kids. And you know what I say to that? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, people. Put those stupid devices away. Everybody, put those stupid devices away. I once had an incident where I was greeting my nephews, who I haven't seen in a year. They both had their heads in one of those devices. And I'm rushing forward to them, and I'm like, hey, this is it, Grace. And I'm having my hands are outstretched, and I think there's going to be a big welcoming hug, and they don't even look up. This is a problem. This is a problem, and it's common sense that it's a problem. It is very obvious that little children, yes, expose them to the technology that they're going to need. Yes, in very small doses. It's common sense. The one thing children need, especially from the ages of 0 to 4, is to play, 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 and especially to play with other kids, not to learn about computers. There's this insanity going on in our culture nowadays about how young kids are, how quickly you have to teach them things. They have their whole lives to learn about computer skills, about ABCs, and 1, 2, 3. Recently, I did a lot of research as I was considering putting my little boy in preschool. And after going to so many different schools and not liking any of them, I finally stumbled upon a Catholic school that I really liked. And I sat down with the principal and I said, okay, I really like this school. I think this is going to be the school I'll send my child to. But explain this one question to me. Why do children have to start going to school? Why do we even need preschool? Is there any reason for that? I mean, when I was growing up, we all went to school. We started in kindergarten. So why do we have to add this extra year? And she said, you know, to be honest with you, it's only because 2 parents are working. So many families have 2 parents working. And so now we, the Catholic schools, feel like, well, if the kids are going to go anywhere, might as well bring them here for preschool instead of putting them in a daycare so we can actually inculcate values if they're not going to be with their parents. But she said, well, you know what, though, honestly, the only thing kids need until about the age of 5 is the love and nurture of their family environment and to play. And we used to know that. It doesn't take all this scientific study to tell us that this excessive iPad use is bad. And you know what I see it as? It's just another form of neglect. It's just another form of abuse. Kids need to interact. And if we don't stop this, we're going to have an epidemic of increasingly people with no social skills and no ability to connect emotionally, as I experienced with my nephews who couldn't take their head out of their electronic devices to give me a hug. I mean, that's really sad. It's sad all along. Anyways, I want to end this show on something happy, which is my favorite show, The Voice. And I want to tell you why it's my favorite show. This is a singing show. And I don't know if you all know it, but the producer of The Voice is actually a Christian. He's a Christian man. He and his wife have done some awesome movies. In fact, they're the ones that produced Son of God. This show, The Voice, is all about the best things in America. And I'll tell you why. You have some of the best singers I have ever heard in a talent competition. The singers are far better than those on X Factor or American Idol. And initially, the judges just hear a voice without seeing a face, and they choose them blindly. That's called the blind audition. So they're not influenced by what somebody looks like. It's purely about the value, the talent that they have, the quality of their voice. The interaction between the judges is formidable. And what I like best is a lot of these individuals, when they're interviewed, when they're asked, well, why are you pursuing this? Some of them say, well, I feel like I was born to sing. And indeed, with such spectacular voices, they truly were. And so many of them say they're doing it to improve the lot of their family, whether it's their children, their parents. But there's a lot of selflessness that is expressed in terms of the pursuit of their dream. But even leaving all that aside, even if these kids, many of them are kids, but they are from all ages, even if these folks are pursuing the dream because they want to enrich themselves, they want to be well known, they want to excel at something, still, that's the American dream. We used to celebrate that achievement based on real skill and real talent. And week going forward, we're now going to be in the live part of The Voice, which is the judges have made their selection. This is another thing I like about the show. It's not purely democratic, which means you don't have the audience, the voice of the mob weighing in just yet. The mob weighs in only after some very skilled professionals have weeded out those who just don't make the cut. So by the time you get 12 singers to choose from, you've got 12 outstanding singers. And what you see is a contest among the best of the best. And then the American people weighs in to choose who they think is their favorite. So I think it combines this show really, to me, reflects the best of America, the pursuit of one's dreams, but the pursuit of one's dreams based on a lot of hard work, the pursuit of dreams based on real excellence, real talent, and the pursuit of dreams based on acknowledging that there is standards in a given field, not just mob rule. And then finally, the pursuit of one's dreams where the American nation weighs in to the American people exercise their wisdom and their savvy and their knowledge to choose somebody that really speaks to them. The show is brilliant every step of the way, even when you listen to the advice that some of the coaches give the singers. And I think my favorite part of one episode last week was when Shakira, who's one of the judges, told one of the singers, "Let us see your soul in this song." And what is awesome about the show is you see the difference between a singer and an artist who is truly able to convey emotion, the emotional power of a song, and that emotional power conveys empathy sometimes, or we can just relate to it, or simply having an experience of sheer joy, sheer pleasure, or experiencing the sadness of some story expressed in that song. So I want to applaud The Voice as I think being one of the best entertainment shows on television, precisely because it bucks the trend. It's not about entitlement. It's not about fame for its own sake. And it's not about lowering the standards of American culture. It's actually about raising standards and people pursuing excellence. And that's why I'm a huge fan of the show. I never miss an episode, and I can't wait for the live portion, which is going to kick in next week. But before I let you go, I want to wish you all a very, very happy and blessed Easter. It is Easter week. This year, I have been thinking of one thing more than anything else during the Easter season. And by the way, I want to tell you all that Easter is my favorite holiday. I like it much, much better than Christmas. For me, Easter coinciding with springtime, it is always a very hopeful period. And it also calls me to rebirth. Rebirth, just like the spring is reborn, just like Jesus himself resurrects. I think of Easter as a great celebration of rebirth. I always challenge myself to try to improve, correct something that I'm working on, or just enjoy the joy, the pleasure of trying to be reborn in my faith and in my love of Christ. But one of the things that really moves me this year in particular, I'm thinking a lot, especially in the days leading up to the Easter celebration, of Mother Mary and her grief at the loss of her son. I'm thinking about that more even than in other years I've reflected upon Jesus' suffering on the cross. This year I'm reflecting a great deal upon the mother who suffered at the feet of the cross. I cannot imagine her pain, and I think I'm reflecting on it possibly because I have my own son in my arms, and that seems all the more real to me, the tremendous sacrifice that she made and the great agony that she experienced. So my prayers this year, both for Jesus himself on the cross, but also of Mary, admiring her tremendous courage, the depth of her faith, but just sharing her sympathy. And the greatest pieces of art I have ever seen is David's Pietà, where she is holding the dead body of Jesus in her arms. I saw that in Rome, and I've been reflecting deeply on it this Easter season. Well, to all of you, a blessed Easter from the bottom of my heart. You've been listening to Dr. Grace, the editor of Politics and Culture at WorldTribune.com, upholding values that will never die.
Well, if you ask me where I come from, here's what I tell everyone. I was born by God's dear grace in an extraordinary place where the stars and stripes and the eagle fly.
The stories that matter, the issues that count. This is American Heartland with Dr. Grace.